Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz Interview Series with a champion of jazz and the owner of Two for the Show Media, Chris DiGirolamo. He was born in Queens, and these days he is still in New York City strong, giving the world jazz via his post as a publicist, soliciting journalists to write or broadcast stories about these great musicians. During a very engaging talk, we discussed how jazz is doing in 2019, his drumming habit, how he accidentally found his way into PR, and so much more. So please get to know Chris and dig this interview, my friends.
Chris, thank you for taking a minute out for Neon Jazz. I'm looking forward to talking to you about what you do for musicians and how your life has gotten to this point now.
You got it.
So let's start off with the Alpha with you. Where were you born and raised?
I was born and raised in Queens, New York. That's where I was there pretty much most of my life, and now we're out on the east end of Long Island with the business.
Talk to me a little bit about how you grew up as far as, like, you know, jazz and music and how you kind of got to this point where you are a publicist for jazz musicians in 2019.
Well, I'm a drummer and still am, and you know, when the kiddie time allows, I have played pretty much most of my life. And when I was younger, I always wanted to play, and I always was involved in music. And then I was accepted to the Berklee College of Music, and went there for a year and a half, and came out and was offered a job in a recording studio, which became one of the top jazz recording studios in New York. Worked within that business for about 5-6 years between New York and California. And then went into teaching music. It's always been music, you know, that whole line of it. And there's just was always a little, you know, when you have that little voice in your stomach, I always had a little voice that said, you know, you can help these people. You can help these people. And I don't even know what it was or why it came about. Right after 9/11, there was a big swing of downtime in the job market, and I was still teaching and doing some other stuff. And I said to myself, God, I just would love to do something else. And I was writing a drum column for a couple of magazines in New York, and then I did some stuff for Modern Drummer at the time. And somebody made a mistake, and they recommended me as a publicist, but I was a writer, and I guess they just didn't have it set. And I was kind of out of work for a short period, and somebody called me up and said to me, hi, you come recommended to me as a publicist. And I paused. And I went, yeah, okay. and it's 13 years later. That's really kind of how it all came about. It was merely by accident. You know, I always had, like I said, I always had the voice in my stomach saying, you know, you could do this. But it's always been music. I mean, everything has led up to this. And I often share a story about my dad. When I was in college, I worked for him for the summer, and he worked for the New York Times, and I worked in the delivery department of the New York Times, and I used to lay out the newspaper overnight, you know, to all the routes. And I had the New York Times delivers a number of publications that are not the New York Times, foreign publications, and so I would do this job, and I hated it. And but as we get to the other side of it and to do what I do now I know all of those publications from that job. You know, so everything really, every step led exactly up to the mistaken identity with that phone call to what I do now.
So what jazz musicians were you listening to early on that really got you going and made you love it?
You know what? My mom was a real big part of that. She very much involved me in seeing music whenever I was allowed to attend, you know, if it was in a venue that allowed it. She took me to see Ella Fitzgerald. She took me to see Frank Sinatra. She took me to see, you know, Joe Pass. I mean, Chuck Mangione. I mean, all stuff that was kind of accessible. It wasn't, you know, she wasn't taking me to see Ornette Coleman. But it was all accessible stuff, and I always connected to it. And I always knew that, you know what, I could listen to Led Zeppelin and the Grateful Dead, but I could also listen to this. She just really was a big part of opening that door. And you know how it is with that. With jazz, once you open the door, you learn something every day if you're willing, you know, to stay within that realm of learning about the music. Every day I learned something new about the music, and it really started from that. But, you know, also playing the drums, you just always, if you have the right mind towards it and approach towards it, you're going to want to check out what you can, you know. So
Absolutely.
She really was the mainstay of that. And we still go to shows together. So
Cool. Very cool. So the one thing, whenever I explain to people, I'm doing jazz radio, I get CDs in the mail, and PR firms are sending this over to me. It's hard to be succinct and explain exactly what you guys do. So I'm going to ask you, whenever someone says to you, what do you do? And you say, I do PR for jazz artists. Tell me exactly what you do so it can make sense to the regular person out there that's knowing there's momentum behind these artists, but you're a part of that momentum for them to get in front of people.
Well, I think the first thing to say is, because this is the mystery of it, is, and it doesn't bother me, but it's a very thankless job because people don't see what we do. People basically see the artist and will say, oh, hi, Joe, you're all over the place. They don't see what goes behind it. But what happened when I started doing this, and it's occurred for really everybody, all of my colleagues, is we've entered into the independent market. When I started doing this, a lot of labels were closing down left and right, and it was the end of the world. That's how the artists used to look at it. How can I put my music out if I have no outlets? And what I saw was, wait a minute, these record labels that everybody complained about and everybody said, they didn't do this, they didn't pick the right cover, they didn't do the right mix, well, now if you can really buckle down and learn what you need to learn and take advantage of the incredible technology that you and I both know was not there 25, 30 years ago, you're at the steering wheel, and why is that not a good thing? You may have some learning challenges and stuff, but it's a great thing. So when I started, the reason, and I will say this, obviously I worked hard, but there was a tremendous influx of independent artists who needed help. And what happened was I would basically take them on and guide each one as to how to go about it. So when we take an artist, it depends. If it's someone like we just finished a recording with Rudy Royston, we finished a recording with Daphnis Prieto. We're talking about two artists that are well known in the market. They have a long resume. There is a point of them having a new record out with us, and we're doing it where we're trying to just get as much as we can to maintain that visibility for an artist at that level. And that could be somebody, you could take Dave Liebman, and you still say, Dave obviously has a tremendous history and he's a legend, but you still want his name to be in front of people, as one of those legends of jazz and legends of the saxophone. And so you work your campaign a little different there. When someone comes to me and they're brand new, the first thing I tell them is this, and I think, you can attest to this too, is every single artist that we have ever listened to has been brand new. Yeah. And I think they forget that. They forget the fact that, there was a day where somebody said, yeah, there's this guy named John Coltrane. I never heard him, but I heard he's good. There's always a starting point. And with them, they have to understand what it is that is going to go down. And sometimes their ego gets in the way. What they really are doing is just building some sort of profile to continue and continue and continue. And you do that by playing, and you do that by, getting out and gigging, and you get it out by making records and doing everything you can do. And it takes a while. And that's the hardest part for them, because they think, if I have a publicist and I've paid this money and I have a record and they work it, it should be everywhere within 6 months. And that's not possible. Some people do really well, but some people just get their foot in the door to let people know that what they're doing. One of the biggest misconceptions I see and hear all the time is that it happens overnight for certain people because they have money. And a great example of that is Donnie McCaslin. I went to school with Donnie, and Donnie was very popular in college at Berkeley, and he played on a lot of people's recitals and did all the work he needed to do. But Donnie has struggled, I don't want to say struggled, but has fought, the business and gone and dug in the trenches in the 4 o'clock in the morning wake-up calls and all the things for 20 years before he has established what he has now. Everybody goes, well, it connected with David Bowie, and it's like, let me tell you something. When he connected with David Bowie, he was playing in a dive bar, at 20 years. Now, look, all respect to the 55 bar in New York, but it's not the Hilton, you know what I mean, when you go in there, and he was still doing that, and still does it, So the point is that it's, for veteran musicians, it's just a maintenance of what they're doing and trying to continue to get the coverage for sales and for gigging and for profile. And for newer artists, it's really to just have them establish themselves and get on there. You can't touch third base until you touch first. And it's because it's entertainment, it's performance. A lot of people think because they have a record, they should be at third base. And it's just not reality. So I used to say to people, look, if you're not willing to accept the fact that we could do this and have nothing in return, then you're not ready to do it. And people would kind of go, well, what do you mean nothing? And I'd say, look, we're probably not going to get, it's not going to be a nothing situation, but you have to understand that there could be disappointment because it's the music field. So that's really the gist of it. I mean, and the basis of it is we just try to push. Every artist has a completely different marketing plan. So it's hard to say exactly what you do for each one of them because everyone has a different need.
Who was your first client?
My first client, the guy who called me on the mistake, it was bassist Lyle Atkinson. And Lyle, I believe, played with Nina Simone for a while, and he still plays. He's got to be close to almost 85. He's a resident in New Jersey, and we still always I always just touch base on his birthday and stuff because I've always was forever grateful. And he gave me my first check for the Show Media on Valentine's Day.
Wow.
So that's how, in a truck parked in front of Madison Square Garden during the Westminster Dog Show. So it was like 6,000 dogs around our truck while he was giving me the money.
That's awesome. So 13 years later, you're looking at a pretty big, esteemed client list. Talk to me a little bit about what's going on with your clients.
First of all, the one thing I will say is being a drummer, it's I never really sought out for it, but we've been drum central, and I've got to work with some of the most incredible drummers that ever lived, from Steve Gadd to Pete Erskine to Steve Smith to Lenny White. I mean, I could go on and on and on, and it's almost surreal to be able to, be in the office and have someone like Peter Erskine call you up and ask your opinion on something. It's still, even though the experience is there, it's still surreal. It really is. The current structure of what's happening is, we really float around different things with people that have been around, like I said, and some are brand new. It really fluctuates. But right now we're working with Joe Policastro, who's a bassist from Chicago.
Yeah.
And Joe's been around for a long time. He's probably one of the hardest working independent artists I've ever worked with. He really is. He's just every day, all day, and does it right and does it the correct way with the correct vision of doing things in an honest and hardworking way and gets the results. We're also doing a blues record, kind of a jazz blues record with a musical scholar, Ben Bierman, who's a really interesting record. And Ben has written some incredible textbooks that a lot of the universities and college programs use. There's just been a lot. And, of course, we're on the heels with Daphnis Prieto. We're still doing that. We got the Latin Grammy nomination, and then we got the Grammy nomination coming up for the Grammys in February for the Best Latin Jazz Recording. So there's a lot. We're working with drummer Peter Kogan. We're working with Lewis Porter, who is pretty much an incredible pianist and a John Coltrane historian, and he's been around for a long time. So we always vary it. I mean, it really varies. We have some vocal projects coming up with some young vocalists. Those are always a challenge. So when it comes to vocals, we always try to make sure that, if we're listening to something and we're going to take it, it's really got to be, burning. So
without a doubt.
There's a lot. I mean, and it always fluctuates.
So let me ask you this. What is the health of jazz in 2019?
That's a great question, man. Look, I think the health is fine. I don't think anybody's dying, But listen, as long as I've been alive and can remember conversations, I've heard the jazz is dead thing, and I'm just so tired of it. If you think about it, it's really more alive than ever because we have more musicians, promoting the music and getting their music out there. And there was, a long time where that was very restricted. I think it's really healthy. I think there's a lot of changes. There's a lot of things that are changing and people are afraid of. The streaming, the independent market, I can't get a manager, I can't get a gig, I can't. You really have to structure yourself in the music world a lot differently now. But it doesn't mean it's in a bad state. I had someone say to me yesterday from Europe, they said, well, we don't really do reviews for this publication anymore. My editor said if somebody wants to check something out, they can just go to Spotify and listen to it and see if they like it or not. And I'm like, come on.
Yeah.
There's been editorial coverage for, forever. And, yeah, somebody could do that, but how are they going to know about it? And it's, so there's a lot of ups and downs. You get a lot of groaning. I've seen many people come in, Joe, and work with us and be really hip to it and get on it. And when they see what the challenge is, sorry, I don't want to do this anymore, and you don't hear from them. There were many people I went to Berkeley with who are very successful, and I work with and still know. And there are many people there that were really set to shoot for the stars and do great, and they just couldn't handle the muck and mire of the business. And so my answer is it's definitely very healthy to me. It's just that there's more challenges in making it work in 2019 than ever before. But those challenges don't mean that it's necessarily bad. It's just challenging. You got to try to put on a new face towards it.
So let me ask you this. The Jazz DeLorean pulls up in front of your house. You can punch in the digits, you can punch in a location, and you go. Where are you going to go? What jazz musician in the history of jazz do you want to see live?
Do I want to see live? Oh, my Lord. And you're only going to give me one?
No, you can have a couple.
Oh. Well, I've actually been blessed. I've been blessed to see Miles about 10 times. So when I was younger, I used to go see Miles all the time, anytime. After his retirement, I was able to see him. So, I mean, clearly it would be Coltrane, Parker, just because of the insanity of their playing. And, I really have had a chance. As a drummer, people say, well, wouldn't it be Buddy Rich? And I've seen Buddy play like 10, 11 times. So I've really been blessed. But I say, if I had to say, it would probably be Parker and Coltrane at this point. And if I had to throw a rock in there, it would be Led Zeppelin.
Right on. That's good. I like it. So at the end of the day, we all have these personas that we have. We have perceptions that people form about us, family, friends, fans, business associates, but you know who you are. Tell me, who do you think you are?
Wow. You're really trying to put the screws to me today. Honestly, I have to say, every human being in this world is on a learning curve, until the day you get here, till the day you go. I will say this, and let me I'll simplify it. When I started doing what I do, I used to hear a couple of things. I used to hear, the people who do what you do are not honest. And I'd say, okay, Chris, so you need to be as honest as, honest in everything you do. There's no reason to not be honest about it. So when I take approach to my business, it's a very honest approach. And I always would say, what else would you think about this? And I'd say, well, people say they're going to do things and they don't do them. And I said, okay, well, so you need to be honest and you need to do things that you say you're going to do. Keep to your word. Certainly life throws a curveball once in a while, but you keep to your word if you can. And then the other side of it is work hard. I've never seen anybody, come away from working hard without a benefit of it. So, because we're talking about Two for the Show Media and we're talking about the business, I'd say the structure of who I am is someone that's very honest, someone that does what they say, and someone that works very hard. Am I perfect? Absolutely not. Do I get stressed out about this lovely world of jazz? Absolutely. But that's what I would say how I see myself. And listen, I think we all know, it took a while to say that, So
yeah, it's like wine. It just needs to maturate, and wisdom comes along with it. So
I know, you figure it out, and then you're 70. I mean, I'm not 70, but
I know. That's why that Benjamin Button's movie's so good. It's like, why can't we start at the end and work our way to
and go back,
have no bills and have nothing to worry about? Instead, we do it the wrong way. Someone's got to fix the script. So, but at any rate, Chris, hey, thank you for what you do for jazz. Thank you for taking some time out. It was great to get an insight. I appreciate it, man.
Oh, please, man. Thank you. You definitely, sometimes we don't realize the impact we have, and you do a lot.
Well, thank you. I'm only standing on the shoulder of giants. That's all I'm doing here.
All right, Joe. Thank you.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to yet another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in Queens, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Chris for his time and giving us all these great songs from these wonderful jazz musicians. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.